Good afternoon. Sometimes it's tough to be the after lunch presentator. In my work life, I'm a software engineer. I own a small software company, and I've given presentations at trade shows, and there are times that I look out in the crowd at 1:30 in the afternoon, and 2/3 of my prospective customers are asleep. And so it's nice to see you guys all awake here this afternoon. Well, I am honored to be on a really kind of a cool school board. We have some all of them are extremely competent people from very diverse backgrounds. We have James Woods, who is Dr. James Woods. He's the Associate Professor of Economics at Portland State. He's the past chair of the school board. Alicia Reese, who is very involved in Parks and Rec and neighborhood associations in Parkrose. We have a board member who's Vice President and Chief of Operations at Northwest College of Construction, and we have a board member who is an accountant for the federal court system. And so we have some really high-powered people on this, and it's great because the diversity that's there helps us be a great school board. And that's one of the keys to this, is about having diversity on your school board. I think it is really important to have that broad spectrum of intellectual talents and also a wide range of emotional intelligence, because that all plays in, and you need to be aware of that. So when I came on the board, and Alicia, Jamie, and I were all elected in 2005, when we got on the board, the first thing they did, apparently they knew that I was an engineer, they said, "We have a problem with the math program at the high school. Here's a report. Can you form a committee to deal with this?" I was going, okay. So we did. The school board had set forth a proposal to Northwest Educational Labs to do an analysis of our math program. And that was very important to kind of opening the door to the work that we are talking about today. Because teachers, the one thing about teachers, if you don't know as board members, they are very, very concerned and very, very unsure sometimes of themselves. I'll tell you a little story. I met with the teachers, sat down at the math department of the high school. The first thing they wanted to tell me was their credentials and what they did. And that was important for me to realize they're very nervous. And that was a key for me to take a step back, say I'm not here to point fingers as a board member. I'm here to find a solution, and you are key to that solution. So part of this is about that relationship you have with your teachers. And one of the things I have to talk about at this point in the game is that we went through a transition through this program that we did. When we were involved in the study of the high school math curriculum, our current superintendent at the time, who had begun this work, retired, and we had to go through a superintendent search process. And at that point, after searching nationwide, we came to the conclusion that this great woman down in Coos Bay, Oregon, was our person. And we went down and visited her, and it was a great opportunity. We snatched her up and brought her to Portland. Thankfully, her family lived in the Parkrose School District. So that was kind of like, oh yes, we got her. So that's really important, because what she brought was this idea that boards need to be professionally trained. Now, all of us in our field, and that's what I was talking about earlier, about how important it is to have a board with this wide intellectual span, kind of intelligence, is that each of us understand the importance of further education in our professional lives. So we bring that to the table as school board members. So one of the first things we did was start reading books and talking about them. And Dr. Woods was instrumental in this work that we're talking about today, because we read this book. He and Dr. Gray together decided that this was a book that was good for us to read. This book is, if you haven't read it as a school board member, you need to read it. This book you must read, because without understanding this book, you may fail. So this is very important. And in this book, it talked about how to form a committee. So one of the areas you are all aware of, and it's very important also that you be quite aware of this resource. Because where school boards often make gigantic mistakes and cause all kinds of problems does not understand the separation between day-to-day management and your role as a policy person. Policy is your king. Philosophy becomes your king. That you decide how you're going to set up policy and the philosophy to set forth that daily management that you stay totally and absolutely out of, unless you are very careful and ask your superintendent where you can be involved. And then set up some very strict self-regulation on your part. Because you have to remember to always ask the question, am I stepping into management, or am I reinforcing policies that the board has in place? That is key. If you don't do that, none of the rest that we'll talk about today will work. Okay? So you have to understand that. That is extremely important. So the next thing we did after understanding this was we kind of assigned committees. So we came up with several committees. One of them was a financial committee, which Alicia Reese chairs. One of them was a committee on communication, which a former board member has. We have formed a committee on legislative policy that now Dr. Woods is chairing. And so we have these committees. They asked me, since I had done the math work, to really talk about how do we form a committee on school improvement. So I did a lot of research, and a lot of that research depends upon who your resource person is. In our district at the time, it was Dr. Jeff Rose, who's now the superintendent of Canby. He was our curriculum director. And we talked, and he gave me some books to read, and I have a variety of them. And in your packet, there's a resource page, and you may want to look at that when we're all done. But to start out with, what I want to do is show you a little bit about what we came up with. And in your packet, you will see the purpose of our committee. Now, what you need to do, or what I think is helpful, I should say, is that you put something like this together if you're going to form a committee. Because communication with everyone in your school district is highly important. You must communicate exactly what you're doing. If you do not communicate exactly what you are doing, again, there's a possibility of failure. So this is just the purpose of our committee. And I usually don't put this up so you can read, because PowerPoints aren't necessarily to read thoroughly, but this is what this is all about. So you might want to read that real quick. It's about me as the chair of this committee communicating back to the board. And there's some things that are very important about this. I don't know if you're familiar with your governance policy on your board, but on our board, getting stuff on the agenda, there's a process. One of the things about getting stuff on the agenda is, as a committee chair, I can get stuff on the agenda instantaneously. I just call up my chairperson and say, I want it on the agenda. Jamie goes, it's on the agenda. I mean, that's how it works. So it's very quick. You can act very fast if you need to. These were our original goals. And that's also on that sheet that's in your flyer, or in your handout. There's also another sheet of our current goals. And I don't want to go into that, but take a kind of look. You'll see the progress from these, which are very, in some ways, more general, to some more specific goals. And as you work through this process, if you decide to do this, that's what will happen. You go from some very general goals that everyone can agree on to some very specific stuff that requires hard work on the part of teachers. And Dr. Monty and Michael Lopes and Whitney will talk about that work as it is implemented in the classroom. One of the things I want to talk about here is the we thing. The we is very important. It's about we need to learn best practices together. If you want, one of the things that I found out in this process was that in order for me to do this job well, I had to understand the terminology of the education system. I had to know what classroom teachers went through. I had to and I'm fortunate. I'm married to a third grade elementary school teacher that teaches in Vancouver. She's taught third grade, first grade, and second grade for 25 years. So I come home from a school board meeting and say, I'm thinking about doing this, 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 this. She goes, whoa. And so she goes, you need to think about this. And so I have an advantage. But though finding someone that can be your kind of like, whoa person is really important if you're a board member. Someone that you can trust, that you can go and talk to about some of these policy ideas you may have. And then you need to model these practices in the committee. I say this, and this is absolutely true. My most enjoyable part of the school board is my monthly school improvement meetings. Because at those meetings, I get to have an opportunity to interface with 2 teachers, 2 administrators, Dr. Monteith, and myself. And we have a great opportunity to share up and down the chain these ideas, these policy implementations, the actual implementation in protocols, where Dr. Monteith will talk about that later, about actual practices. One of the books that we've read that has been very helpful, if you haven't read it, this book is great because it really touches me also in the business world. A lot of the ideas in this book come, you'll read it, and if you're an executive in a business, you'll go, wow, that's exactly what we need to do. But this book, Teach Like a Champion, is an excellent book. I would recommend it to everyone because it is fantastic. So that's one of those other pieces where we read and we research and we find out what's best for the kids in our district, what's best for our teachers. And then you also have to understand that because you as a board do not get involved in daily management practices, you need to put into policy things that can affect daily management practices. One of the ways you do that is, again, through this book, and there's probably people in the room that's familiar with this. This is Charlotte Danielson's book on evaluation and how you use the tool of evaluation to help change instructional practice in the classroom. Vitally important. Vitally important. So, to sum some of this up, to be successful, a school board member must remember to respect the policy-maker role of the board and the management role of the superintendent. And in our district, we have a unique relationship. You're going to have a differently unique relationship, but have that relationship with your superintendent. Talk with them. Share your ideas with them. Let them shape those ideas in some ways because they're familiar with the law, they're familiar with pedagogy, which is a big word for how you teach. They're familiar with a lot of the language, and they will help you so that you become effective board members. And then be willing to learn. One of the things that's most important, I'm a dad, so I have 2 children, I'm very proud of them, is this idea of the lifelong learner. As a software engineer, you can imagine, I wake up in the morning, open my email and go, oh, okay, new data structure today. Oh, a new computer language I might have to learn. Oh, Google's come up with a new operating system. So I have to become this lifelong learner stuff. But that is very important for your board to model. Because if you expect your students to do it and your teachers to do it, the board has to do it too. So those are some really important things. And also work together to help students by doing policy, by doing good planning, look for resources, and then have a discussion about it. We have board retreats every year as a board. That's our kind of opportunity to have field day on discussions. If you don't have those board retreats where you can have an opportunity to discuss things, I would say send an email to Dr. Woods and ask him, you can find it on the Parkrose webpage, and ask him how he did it. The last couple of years he's worked on it. We've done a great job with that as a board. I'm chairperson this year. We're going to have some fun with that come next fall. But very important stuff. And at this point, I'm going to introduce my right hand, because without this work, without Yuki and my relationship, this doesn't work. And Yuki's great to work with. She's just absolutely marvelous. So there you go, Yuki.